Well, we have a look now at the mood in Germany when it comes to the pandemic. Pollster Infratest Dimap has just published its latest ARD-Deutschlandrend, a monthly nationwide survey. The poll was taken before the latest lockdown announcements. Now, despite general acceptance of the anti-pandemic measures, increasing numbers of Germans want to see an easing of restrictions. Check it out. 10% say restrictions should be lifted completely. 53% want the curbs to be lifted, at least partially. And only 1/3 of Germans say that they don't want the restrictions to be lifted at all. Let's bring in DW political correspondent Nina Haza. So what kind of easing of restrictions do Germans want to see the most, Nina?
Well, the poll says that the priority for Germans seems to be for non-essential shops to open again. 27% of those polled say restrictions should be lifted completely, and 55% say that they should be opened at least partially. And not even 1 in 5 of those polled want shops to stay shut. And then the ranking goes as follows: restaurants, then hotels, schools, museums, cinemas and so on, and then gyms. But you have to keep in mind that for all those sectors, even those ranking a bit lower, that 2/3 of Germans want some kind of opening to happen. And that, of course, explains the pressure that the government is under to strike that balance of keeping the virus at bay and the mutations, of course, and the desire by so many in this country that there need to be different solutions than simply extending the lockdown, so to massively step up testing and vaccinations, both of which has, of course, been very slow.
Okay, so meantime, let's look at infection rates and hospitalizations now, because they have varied widely in different parts of Germany. Most of those polled, here are the figures. Most would prefer to see a regionalization of anti-coronavirus measures. Only 38% say that the restriction should be consistent everywhere in the country. 58% prefer the measures to be regionally variable. So, Nina, any indication that the preferences expressed break down along party lines, for example? How is this looking?
Oh, yes, this was extremely clear in this poll. The polls always ask for party affiliations. Which party do you support? And so we do have a very clear picture. Supporters of 5 out of the 7 parties seem to be clearly split in 2 when it comes to whether to stick to the current restrictions or to allow for gradual opening. If you take Angela Merkel's Conservatives, for example, 43% want restrictions to stay in place as they are, versus 52% who say that there needs to be some careful opening. And that is, of course, very close, 43 versus 52. So Angela Merkel is in a dilemma with her own party. And the same is true for the Social Democrats, the Greens, the Left Party followers. But then you've got the far-right AfD and the business-friendly FDP party, where the picture is a completely different one, where there is an overwhelming desire to open up or open up gradually. And that is, of course, not surprising, because the FDP is the party for Germany's Mittelstand, for hotel owners, etc., where many firms are struggling to survive.
Absolutely. And, we're seeing some of those struggles actually playing out in the approval ratings. We mentioned earlier that approval ratings, particularly for Chancellor Merkel, for her government, have been falling. Just 50% of those polled say that they were satisfied with the policies of Merkel's coalition. 49% say they were not satisfied. So, Nina, ultimately, is there a chance that this pandemic could be ruining Angela Merkel's reputation now at the end of her political career?
Well, yeah, she's not going to stand again as candidate for the chancellorship, because Germans, of course, go to the polls in September. But if you look at her approval ratings at the beginning of the crisis and where we are now, they have somewhat gone down if you compare it to the first wave, when they were as high as they hadn't been for 5 years, because she was seen as somebody who can master crises. And that has to do now, the fact that they've gone down with the sluggish start of the vaccination campaign here, the tug of war with and between the 16 state leaders, and the performance of her cabinet, her health minister, her economics minister, who've also had massive slumps in their approval ratings. But Angela Merkel's approval ratings are still higher than they were in the 2 years leading up to the start of this crisis. So yes, she's not as popular as she was during the first wave, but 64% approval still makes her Germany's most popular politician at the moment.
DW political correspondent Nina Hazek reporting from Berlin. And DW political correspondent Simon Young talked through Germany's latest steps in combating the virus with Karl Lauterbach. He's an epidemiologist and a member of parliament who has become known as a voice of caution.
Karl Lauterbach, is Chancellor Merkel leading Germany in the right direction in this pandemic?
This is a very general question, and I'm not giving. I'm not in a position basically to provide grades for her performance. That is not what I would like to do. I think that the decisions that we have come upon yesterday have a couple of very strong points. For example, to change the vaccination strategy so that we have a further delay between the first and the second vaccination, so that we can provide more older elderly people with first vaccination. I also believe it is correct to use the AstraZeneca vaccination for the elderly, and I also believe that it is correct to use a national testing strategy, an evidence-based national testing strategy to, let's say, work against a third wave which we are currently encountering. But a general position about what Merkel has done and not what we currently do is basically a common performance by the governors of the states and the federal government and even parliament.
The Chancellor talks about an emergency brake if infections go back up. You don't believe in the emergency brake?
I believe in the emergency brake. Once we are up to, let's say, an incidence rate of 100 per 100,000 inhabitants per week, we will come back to the lockdowns that we currently have. So that is the emergency brake, and I do not only believe that this is an emergency brake, I also believe we will have to use it.
Right, you've tweeted that the strategy will cost us a lot of COVID cases and it won't help the economy. Aren't you being too pessimistic?
I don't think I'm too pessimistic. What's going to happen? We will have increasing case numbers because we are in a third wave, and the decisions from yesterday will not help to curtail the third wave. And at the same time, we will not be able to help the economy because we cannot open restaurants or bars or anything, because when there is an increase in caseload, such openings will not happen.
So you agree with the Bavarian leader Markus Söder, who says that our hearts tell us to open up, but common sense says be cautious. Don't people need to have a perspective of how lockdown is going to end?
I do think we have a perspective. The perspective is here vaccination for everyone who is prepared to get vaccinated, to speed up the vaccination project. We have come up with important decisions with respect to that yesterday, very important decisions, and to use antigen testing, self-testing as a bridge technology. So that is the perspective.
Right. The strategy is based on testing, as you say. Are there enough tests, self-tests and quick tests available in Germany?
At least we do know that enough tests could be produced in Germany. We now have to make sure we cannot allow a mistake here. We have to make sure that the tests that can be produced in Germany will be produced and will also be used in Germany. So that is very important.
You've made a name as a critic of rapid easing in this pandemic and a warning voice. What do you think is the most important thing that the government should do going forward?
We should make it very clear that a third wave is not a minor problem, that this is not a small wave before everyone gets the vaccination. But we, in order to, let's say, have the risk groups vaccinated, have another couple of months to go. That is a very long stretch in order to go through a third wave. So we have to be very, very careful to provide the testing strategy. And you also have to make the population aware that further lockdowns, despite the fact that everyone hates them, may be necessary.
Can you predict when lockdowns will finally end in Germany?
I think that lockdowns will end in Germany once we have, let's say, vaccinated the majority of the population.
Professor Lauterbach, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.